is 12 o'clock. We respect your time, so we start on time. And I'm super excited about today because we're going to be talking about my home state of Ohio. And this is where I grew up. I ended up leaving for about 15 years, but then moved back home. And so we want to talk all about that today. I have seen other markets and 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 they're different, right? Like real estate is so hyper local, and what you can buy in DC or LA is very what you could potentially buy in Ohio. So I don't take my word for it. I have some experts on the call. Miss Jenny Craven is with me. She is also here in my hometown, and she's going to speak to you guys a little bit about how she, for herself and for her investor clients, whether they're local or out of state, how she helps them find deals, analyze those deals, right? Get them rented up. What do we say, Jenny? Find, analyze, and buy them, right? And then I guess like the other part is like maximizing them through property management and things like that. But I want to show you guys, I mean, the main point of today is really to show you what's possible in our neck of the woods and our space in the world. And we have people on here and in our grid global community who are who are all over the country and all over the world for that matter. One of our team members is Ria. Actually, she's on here. She's in the Philippines, and we're going to be talking about investing with her in a couple weeks. And another team member we have is in Pakistan, our social media coordinator. So we are truly a global team. And part of what I want to do with our future trainings is really bring these very specific geographic areas to life for you and help tell the story of what's going on in these markets so that you can connect with people there, boots on the ground, who are active in these markets if you want to invest in them. Okay, so I have up here on the screen, get rid of that, the map. So I want to show you the map. I'm a what people call like a whole to part person, right? Like I like to see the big picture and then zoom in. So this is a map that I have found that, again, like I'm a map fan, but I love this one, how it color codes our state. And it just shows you how it's broken up. So today we're not going to talk about, like, clearly there's a lot of opportunity in Cleveland, Toledo, right, Cincinnati. But what we're going to focus on today is really like the central Ohio corridor right here. So let me zoom in a little bit more so you can see this. If you're not from Ohio, a lot of people probably have heard of Columbus, right? It's our state capital. Go Bucks. But we are here in Springfield, Ohio, in Clark County, and this 70, and help me out here, Sarah. Didn't 70 used to be like Route 4 or Route 66 that cut through, like, the first road that cut through all of the country?
40 was National Road that went straight through, but it kind of runs parallel.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So 40, yeah, from coast to coast, 40 runs right through our neck of the woods. And yeah, 70 is parallel to that. Okay, so we're in Clark County, Springfield, like I said, but we're like the way that I see it. I mean, technically, I guess this green is central Ohio, right? Columbus can be seen as central Ohio. So we're a little bit west of that. But not very far. And when I think about the corridor, for us, right, we run a local grid chapter here in Springfield. I think about, our neighbors, Dayton and Columbus. So Springfield is unique in that it's a bedroom community in between Dayton and Columbus. So a lot of people live here for the lower cost of living, but then they commute to the bigger cities, Dayton and Columbus, for work. So it's actually a perfect example of a bedroom community. About 60,000 in Clark County, population wise. But that's kind of like where we're talking about today. And then I'll let Jenny go into the what we have here. So let me send this over to you, Jenny, the screen share.
Sure.
See if you can pull up screen share here. And if not,
I
oh, I
can't
can't send you
while
that. See if
you
you can
are.
screen. Rhea, I think you have to give it to her. Like go to the participants and send it over to her. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to let Jenny start and just kind of tell you a little bit about her. She, like I said, she's one of our leaders here in the Grid Springfield area, investor focused agent. But she kind of has an interesting story about like how she ended up focusing on investments. So Jenny, I will just let you go ahead, introduce yourself and take it away.
Okay. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for being here. Um, I thinking back on the map, I what I love about Springfield and where it's located in Ohio is kind of exactly like you said, it's directly in between Dayton and Columbus. You can get to either one in like 45 minutes or less, but it's also an hour and a half from Cincinnati. It's like a little bit under 3 hours from Cleveland, a little bit under 2 hours from Indianapolis. And so like all of those major airports, all of the resources that go along with those, and like the hospital networks that go along with all of those. It's very interesting to me, the placement of it, and then the fact that the cost of living is so low. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. My name's Jenny, like Jess said. I'm an agent with eXp Realty. I'm part of a team here in Springfield called the Champion Group. Sarah Folk is on this call. She's my team lead. And I got into real estate in 2021. I started because my husband was actually a real estate agent on top of his career as a university professor. And he got into real estate because he was trying to represent himself for his own investment properties with his brother. Our investment journey kind of started back in 2016 when we purchased our own first home. We ended up really falling in love with the process, and always we both kind of said that if we ever wanted to move out of the fields that we were in, real estate would be the next thing. It just was super interesting to us and enjoyable. And so when we finished the grad school hustle and everything, he went and got his doctorate in psychology. I got my master's degree in the teaching of Spanish. I was a Spanish teacher. 2021 rolled around, and we had our first son. And I wanted a better work-life balance to be home with him. And since my husband was already an agent and had already been investing with his brother, it was the most logical next step. So I became an agent. We were living down in the Cincinnati area, actually. And then in 2022, life circumstances kind of happened. My husband decided he wanted to get out of real estate as an agent and take over his parents' business in his hometown of Springfield, Ohio. So I always joke that we met when we were in college. We both went to Ohio University. And if you had asked me at 18 when we met, or 19 or 20, or really like any point up until 2022, if I thought that we would ever live here, my answer was absolutely not. It just didn't, it wasn't a place that I thought we would ever end up. And now that we're here, I am so passionate about this town. It just has something for everyone. Like not only the way that it's centrally located in Ohio, but also the fact that you can get like an urban city feel for your home. You could get a more suburban feel. You could get a rural feel, and it's all in the same city. Like you can have the best of whatever you want, like the vibe that you want for your personal residence. And from an investment standpoint, it's one of the few places that I know of that you can still get on market deals that fall in line with like the golden rules for investing. So that's kind of how I got to this point. I have my Instagram pulled up just because that's like the place I do the most business and putting myself out there. This summer's been a little hectic because my kiddo's home from school. So I'm kind of more of a stay-at-home mom than I am an agent right this second, but he goes back in 3 weeks and then I'm going to be back on Instagram. So please feel free to connect with me there. If you want to talk further or see a little bit more about my work. I pulled up a couple of things about Springfield just because I am like super interested in it as a city. If we look at new developments in the Springfield, Ohio area, there are like 4 at least going on right now. One of my Springfield people let me know if I have that wrong, but there are a lot of new builds happening, a lot of growth that's happening, especially on the outskirts of town. Like if you are on 70 headed towards Columbus, this development is going in called Melody Parks. That's going to be full of not only residential, but also retail space, that the draw is trying to pull people from the Columbus area to bring more of a population to our town. And I think it's going to be huge. It's such an awesome project. And I talk about it all the time when I talk with investors, because Springfield has kind of had an up and down trajectory over time, where at one point it was ranked like the happiest place to live in America in like the 80s. And then it got hit really, really hard with the recession. And now we're seeing a lot of upturn and a lot of growth. And it's just a super exciting time. So that's usually my pitch to investors when they're looking. Springfield has shown up on several lists for best places to invest and like booming housing markets, along with some of the other places in Ohio, like Cincinnati and Dayton and Columbus. But the pricing in Springfield is just so much more reasonable than those areas that I personally feel like it's a lot less difficult to find those deals. So am I missing anything, Jess, about Springfield?
No, that's great. That's great. It's like, it's a context setting, right? Like, what does it look like? People say, be in the path of development. There's certainly areas, like Jenny mentioned, of development in our town. So the first thing, Jenny, really that comes to mind when somebody says, like, well, how do you find these deals? And you just mentioned it. It's like, yes, all of the off market ways, right, that we teach, that we help investors find deals, which is meetup groups, friends and family, letting people, brand building. So the off market deals is one side of it, but what's unique about our market is that some of these deals can be found on market, right? Like, they can be found on our local MLS. And so Jenny is really she's looking at both sources of deals for investors, the off market stuff, but then also the on market stuff. So Jenny, actually, I have some questions for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So as you are tracking new inventory on the MLS, how often do you see new opportunities pop up, and how quickly do you see them go?
Yeah. So, it depends on the deal, obviously. I always like to say there's something for everybody as far as investing here, because everybody's numbers are a little bit different and the margins that they want to achieve are a little bit different. But typically I see multiple like 1% or higher deals coming on the market every week. And what I do is on Mondays, I carve out like 2 hours and I sit down and I create a newsletter that I send out to my email list of investors that kind of goes over what's on the market that week. I pulled up an old one all the way back from May just because I wanted to have one this past week. There were a couple and they were decent, but I wanted to pull up one where I was able to highlight some off-market opportunities as well. But typically I send out a newsletter that looks something like this. I report on the actual listing. It's a clickable link, even if it gets sent as a PDF and email, pulls it up on realtor.com so they can see it. And then I usually include either the rentometer report, or if it's a potential flip, I include some comps that come from RPR, which is something that I have access to as an agent because it links directly with the MLS and I'm able to look at comps. Not only ones that, have sold on market, but also ones that have sold off market, anything that's public record, and kind of pull all those in together to be able to analyze it.
Okay,
So,
Jenny, can I stop you there for a second
yes,
and
ma'am.
go back to that? So I
Yeah.
want everybody on this call to realize how hugely valuable that is in as an agent partner. She takes the time, she said 2 hours a week to skim all of the on market off market deals, to create context. And I've told her this before too. Like, this is what I love about it. She doesn't just send a link of listings. She provides advice and guidance and context around these potential investment deals. It is so valuable. So a couple things about this. Number one, if you want to get on her newsletter that she does not send to everyone, it is not public. She is sending that to people who she is, in direct conversation with. Drop your email in here. She will connect with you on that. So definitely connect with her on that. But then also, I guess, another note is, ask, like, if you're trying to get into a relationship with other agents in your market who say that they understand investments and that they understand the investment game, like, ask them for context on some of these listings, right? Like, they should be able to look at an opportunity and provide some of that guidance for you. It doesn't mean that, you're the king of the kingdom. Like, you're going to make the final decision on whether you buy. You have to do your due diligence, but that's how we see our, investor focused agent partners, as like, you know, advisors, right? Like, who can really help you understand what the potential of an investment is. Okay, so I just wanted to say that, Jenny, go ahead. How do
Yeah.
you then take these, right? Like, you know how to analyze them, but how do you help your investor clients walk through a potential deal?
Sure. To speak to your note about finding an agent or an expert that's able to look at it and analyze it for you, it did take me some time of doing this. It wasn't like an overnight thing. It took a lot of like really understanding my area, really understanding the neighborhoods, really understanding the market. And now I feel like I can look at most homes and be able to tell you like a 3-1 in Springfield generally in anywhere from like a C area and up is going to rent for, $1,000 to $1,200. And so that's like I have that stat in my head, but it takes a little bit of time to get to that point from looking at all of these and kind of running all of these different reports. So typically what I do is I'll start off and I'll open all these tabs, and that's why I have all these tabs open right now. But I only work in Springfield with investors because for the sake of the time it takes in my business, it makes the most sense for me to stay super local. So I get a lot of people that ask me about Dayton or that ask me about Columbus, and there are deals to be had in those areas. But with investors, a lot of the time from an agent perspective, it's a yes or a no once we see it. Unlike with residential clients, you need to see it in order to be able to make that decision. And a lot of like more emotional factors go into it. With investors, it's usually like the numbers work or they don't based on the condition of the home. And so for me, it makes the most sense as an agent to stay hyper local. And that has worked out really well so far for my clients too. It has made it so that I have the time to like really know the
Noah,
here
I don't want to hear that kind of language.
as well as you know, being able to like make it work for my time as well. So I look up just Springfield and I always sort it by the newest listings on Monday mornings. That way I'm able to see what's new, and I can usually stop myself when I've seen a property that I have already looked at or analyzed. I typically only look at single family and multifamilies. These other areas are not what most of my investors are looking for at this time. Every once in a while I sort it by price, but I don't typically try to put a limit on it. Like I said, at this point, I can guesstimate what something's going to rent for, or if it seems like it's priced in a way for the area that's low. So I just kind of go through what's on the market and I pick those out. So this is one that I could pull up and kind of show as an example, but a lot of these are these ones that are boarded up that are listed or in receivership, and so the process is a little bit different. So far, that hasn't been a good fit for any of my investors that I have looking. But in this case, obviously a 2-1 at $55,000, we know that this could either be a great like BRRRR future rental, or it could be a potential flip based on that price. Like I know that without having to even necessarily look at the area. But if I do take a look at the area, then I can narrow in on those numbers a little bit more, pull it up and go from there. So typically, if I were going to do it with this one, just since it's the first one that popped up, pull it up, get to know what's in the listing description a little bit. Like I said, these are a little bit different of a process than the ones I would typically look at.
Hey, Jenny, can you let people know, like, what does it mean for a property to be in receivership?
I may have to defer a little bit more to my team lead on this one. Sorry, Sarah. I know that this is not to pull you in.
Broker.
The process of it, I actually haven't even quite been through. I've looked at a few of these, but it's a little more than I've been through
Involved.
with any of my clients. So, Sarah, would you be willing to speak to that?
So I know this one is one of a series. So the listings that are listed by this Parker Realty Associates, they're all part of that huge group of them, Jess, that we were talking with Max about last night, where the city these properties are in a receivership, and there is a process that they have to go through as far as the closing. You can see they've got everything boarded up on there. So they've already taken those steps to get it into the hands of the receiver, who then is handling the closing. Then the contracts are a little bit different. I don't know how it works in other states. I've on this particular receiver, I've dealt with them one time. And it is pretty black and white as far as what paperwork they need and the steps that are in place. But I can only speak to how it's handled here in Ohio.
Is that so? So when a property goes into receivership, what does that mean? Does it mean that
So
it's considered a nuisance to the community? Like what are
so
the
there's actually notices on the I'm circling my cursor like, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Somebody's doing that too, Jenny. Thank you. There's notices on there as far as who the receiver is and who the property manager is and all of that, and who to contact. My understanding with these properties is they were reported at some point, maybe someone passed away, they couldn't find the owner. It got kind of lost in the system, and my last conversation with Max was there's over 600 of these properties that the city has that they need to get sold, and they have a certain amount of time.
Wow.
And there's systems and processes, I guess, to get them on the market as quickly as they can and into the hands of investors.
Yeah, and thank you, Sarah. I appreciate that. And I didn't know there were 600. That's crazy. By the way, we are going to talk to Max. He just confirmed September 4th. So he's going to talk about buying these properties with like title issues, right? Like liens and title issues and all of that. But the note here for everybody kind of globally is that in your market, depending on what your local process is, you may have homes like this that come up, right, Jenny, on the MLS or come up on the market, that may or may not be a fit depending on what the extra stuff is that you might have to go through as an investor to buy that property. So, okay. So that's a receivership one. Your investors so far have not chosen to kind of go down that path. But she's able to look at it, right, condition wise. Is that kind of what you were saying before?
Yeah, I mean, like this is one that would have caught my eye, especially if it weren't in a receivership, just based on the price. Because I know that like if something's going this low here, then it has the potential to be a good investment property depending on the goals and the level of comfort that everyone has with the condition of it. So the way that I would analyze it if it weren't in a receivership, and like I said, I just pulled this one up because it was the first one that came up today as one of the newer ones that's available. But I would pull up the listing. I would look at where it's at on the map so that I can get a feel for the area. And then I would run it through Rentometer. That's my first step usually, is to try and figure out a 2-1 in this area. What could it rent for? So I pay for this subscription. I think it's something like $80 a year. And let's see if I can scoot you guys over.
Oh yeah, that's not bad at all then to get.
No, it's not. But it's like the most useful technology that I feel like I have at my disposal, just because it's so with trying to figure out. I set that it's a 2-1. I just put in the address. I let it look back 12 months because it's reporting on any like known leases that are in place. And usually I go any building type because I can get into a little more detail. I think they usually offer like 5 free reports if you have a new account, but this is how it comes up if you're not running the full report. And then because I pay for the annual subscription, I get a certain number of pro reports. I think it starts at like 250, and I'm in August and I still have 183 of them left. So it's like worth every penny for me as an agent and as an investor to be able to like look in more detail, because on this one in particular, I'm able to see the average, and on the map, it's kind of going off of this like gauge over here. So any of the red comps are going to be ones that are going for above that average. Any of the blue ones are going to be like smack dab in the middle. and any of the green ones are going to be lower. But obviously in this particular area, and I would say that anything south of 40, like Main Street that runs right through town, is going to be one specific area that I'm looking at. So in this area where the orange house is, I've got one comp to look at. And so in that case, I would want to look at that in a little more detail, and I would want to pull up the pro report. And when I do that, it gives me some market stats, but I usually jump right down to whatever that first comp is. So in this case, it's this comp A. It's a 2-bed, 1-bath house. So that's helpful to know. And I can look at a lot of the stats about the house and see what it was rented for. So the last known lease that was signed was October of 23, and it was leased for $1,200. That seems high to me, because it's above the average and because of what I know of the area and the rents that are typically found in this area. Again, these ones are all also south of 40, so that would be my next step, because that's one way that I kind of divide the neighborhoods in my head based on all of the research that I've done. And like the market that I know is in place for rentals in that area, and typically what they go for. So it's C, E, and G are the next few. So C rented for 800, E rented for 1,000, G rented for 899. Those are more in line with what I think it could probably go for. And knowing that I've got 3 that I could potentially pull for that, that's kind of how I would look at the rents. This is obviously if it's at rentable condition, which for this receivership property, it's not. But that's where then I would try and approach it with certain investors as a potential BRRRR, where we know it needs some work. We know that we can get it under value. And we know that like a 1% deal on this is going to be somewhere around 90,000. So if you can be all in at 90,000, if you can be all in at less than 90,000, it's an even better opportunity as a BRRRR, if you're looking to buy and hold. If we're looking at it from the perspective of a potential flip, that's when I jump over to RPR. And again, I think this is a software that I have access to because of the NAR and my access to the MLS as an agent. So for investors, this may be a little bit harder to get the access to, but this is one where I can go through and I can pretty easily create a CMA, like I said, using comps that are not just the solds that you can find on Zillow, but the ones that are like public record, anything that was through the MLS, stuff that was off market, et cetera, et cetera. So it asks you to confirm what we know about the house. I'm taking it all from the listing just for the purposes of this. And let me know if I'm kind of flipping through this too fast, but
no, go ahead.
when
And this
looking
is
at,
something that you do for all of your investor
every
clients.
week.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So you can set the parameters, you can set the area. Am I not? I am in Missouri. That's not what I meant to do. Hold on, let me go back and get to High Street in Springfield. I was like, that doesn't look like the same house. There we go. Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Yes. And so it gives an estimate, like it usually tries to get a little close to whatever it's on the market for if it's live. If it's not, it gives an estimate based on its own look at the comps, and then you can kind of go through and change it. So public record data has it as a 4-bed, but the listing has it as a 2. Typically the listing is going to be more up to date, but because there's a little bit of a discrepancy there, it may want me to like change that info. So sometimes I do a little more digging on that. Sometimes I go with what the listing is and then go back later if I need to. But
why do you think it would say that on the public record 4 bedrooms versus 2? I mean, that's pretty substantial.
It could have been something where like they knocked down walls on a couple of those bedrooms and just never updated it with the auditor.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So that's a part of the investigate, and that's part really though of that investigatory work that you do on behalf of your clients, which again is huge, and for yourself and your own properties, which is hugely valuable.
Yeah. In this case, the list agent may not have that info because it's in receivership, but I could still ask, I could still like make assumptions if I got the opportunity to tour it, kind of take a look at the layout. I usually go out 6 months for comps, and then I let it auto populate whatever the parameters are and adjust them as needed. So if I search and see what has sold in the area, it gives me a list. It gives them to me on the map in case I want to stick to like the very similar area. And then I try to narrow it down from there. So in looking at comps, I typically try to find the same number of beds and baths. I typically try to be within the same like 20-year period. And typically try to stay within like 200 square feet of the listing if I can. So looking at
Mhm.
this one, it's 1350, it's a 2-1, and it was built in 1922. So those are the things I want to stay with. I also like to stay within a mile if I can, because Springfield is small enough that I can do that most of the time. But in this case, the biggest thing for me is going to be staying south of North Street, because those are going to be more accurate comps based on, like I
Mhm.
said, what I know of the area. So if I'm trying to figure out ARV, I want to look at the highest comps. Like, I don't want to look at the ones that also sold for 55,000, because that's not a good representation of necessarily what ARV is going to be.
Because
But
ARV is after rehab value.
mhm.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So for example, this one sold for 90. It's a 3-bed instead of a 2-bed, but it's a little bit smaller square footage wise. I might use it if I can't find anything else, just so that I know, like I said, it's a little bit higher as ARV. Same thing over here. 3-bed or 1 bath, within 200 square feet. I might use this one. I'm kind of doing this pretty quickly just to show, but it gives me an estimate based on all that, and then I can go through and I can adjust the comps. So
Yeah, no, Jenny, I appreciate this. And by the way, if you guys have questions while she's going through this, maybe not particularly about this property, but like about the process or even about Springfield in general, pop them in the comments below. So Jenny, what my question then would be, you clearly have an in-depth process, right? Like you clearly understand the market. And I was gonna make a note about what you said in the beginning, which was you chose to focus directly on Springfield. That allows you to go deep, right? Instead of wide, and really understand the market and
mhm.
like an instinctual, like you know like where something is, what it might be versus outside of those markets. And by the way, guys, like Dayton's not far from us, but it's a different market. And so, that's why we're doing this call just on Springfield, because it's a big enough market, even though it's a smaller town, to have an expert in this area keep their eyes on like just this circle. Okay, so if somebody wanted to invest in Springfield, Jenny, what kind of housing stock um is available? So for example, obviously Northern Virginia, it's single family homes or townhouse condo. Like there's no multifamily really in Northern Virginia. When I lived there for 8 years, I was stunned by that because we see it all over Ohio, but it doesn't exist. So if somebody was like, hey, what can I find in Springfield, Ohio, aside from commercial, because we do have commercial opportunities too, but between single fams and between, duplex, triplex, like what is the housing stock mix
Yeah.
potential look like here?
So in the last like year, I've probably seen like a handful of triplexes and fourplexes, and otherwise, I would say from an investment standpoint, where the numbers are going to be worth it, it's mostly going to be single family and duplexes. Um,
Ooh,
yeah, and most of them are going to be like 1950s and older, and so
okay. Okay. So 1950s and older, right? And by the way, like my house is 1950, so like it depends on how like well preserved the 1950 home is. But 1950s and older, when you single family homes and rentals and duplexes. Why not the tri and fourplexes? Because I've seen them around. Like, is that just typically what your investors, they're not typically buying those? Like,
no, I haven't seen that many of them on the market.
mm,
There are some, but and I can think of one fourplex that I have seen in the last like year, and I actually think it's on the market right now.
mm,
But I spoke with a buyer that was previously under contract on it, and they said that they have some water intrusion issues, and that's part of why it hasn't sold. So that's not
mm-hmm,
one that I've sent out recently, just because I have that background on it from speaking with a buyer that tried to get it. Um, but otherwise, I feel like I've seen 2 or 3 triplexes, and then like once a week, maybe a duplex comes up or a handful. Like last week, I wrote 5 offers because there were multiple like well-priced duplexes that came on the
mm,
market, and my
mm.
investors just jumped on them. Um, and then otherwise, it's just mostly single family. And with the single family ones, it's a little bit easier to make the numbers work just because the prices are lower. There's more opportunity. There's so many of them. Um,
Hold that thought, because and by the way, we have a Michael Mango in Cleveland. He talks about this. I had a really good conversation with him. A lot of times investors will want to jump into, the multifamily, right, or fourplex, but the numbers, especially if you're a beginning investor, might work better, and you'll be able to get, into the single family homes easier. So, wait, hold on. What was my question? What did you say right before this? I just lost it.
Duplexes, single family homes.
Ah, it'll come back to me. It'll come back to me. Okay, let me see this comment though before I miss it. Naomi says, she says, I missed the beginning, so sorry if this is a repeat. Did you mention how many properties you view every week or day when building your list to send out?
Oh, I didn't mention a specific number because it kind of depends on the week. I just, when I'm sorting them,
Mm-hmm.
kind of like how I had it pulled up, I go as far back as the house I recognize as the most recent one that I analyzed. So in this case, it's this one on Birch Road. And this was Monday, so it was only 2 days ago. But in the 2 days since then, everything north of that has popped up. So if this were next Monday, I would assume that
Mm-hmm.
there's at least like a full page of listings. And I typically go to realtor.com as opposed to any other resource just because I find it to be the most user friendly for my clients. There may be other options that have more available on there, but for me, it's the easiest one when I'm sending them out to clients to have them click through. Even easier to me than using like my CRM and having them use my personal website.
Mm-hmm.
Where I know I would be able to like get a better feel for what they're looking at. But in this case, I'm relying on their feedback if they are interested in something that comes up, just because it's so much easier to link to it. So, I guess I
Jenny,
don't.
So
can I
just
have a question, Jenny, just
Yeah.
so that for Naomi or anybody else too, you could probably say that when you did this the first week or even the first couple of weeks, it probably took a whole lot more work to get it started, because right now, because you've been doing it weekly now for several months, you're just putting in anything, you're taking off the ones that went into contract and you're only adding those new ones
yeah,
or
yeah,
any new
yeah.
off-market ones. So you're not doing as much legwork
Oh yeah.
every single week.
Right.
It's just the new
Yeah.
ones.
So like it took me a minute to build the template. And it took several weeks of like sending the link in an email with the little description and then like attaching all the reports to the email. And it was just not like I knew my investors were probably not going through and trying to like download the reports and then match them up with the text in the email and trying to work all that out. So I had to figure out a way that I could like combine everything. And it probably took me several hours to like design the actual template in Canva. And this is just what worked for me. Like, I'm sure there are a million ways to do it, but I wanted to include the photo, the link to the listing, the report, whether it's the rentometer report or the RPR report, my like quick little bit of feedback on it. And then typically if I go down, it's previous listings, anything that's changed, anything new. So for example, when I sent this out this week, this little house on Pleasant, I went and toured it in between when I sent out last week's newsletter and this week's because I had a client that wanted to see it and he passed on it. And so since he passed on it, I have the videos, I've seen it. Most of the people that are on my email list are not local anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, taking videos is like a huge part of what I'm doing, trying to get these properties out to my investors. And so I'm able to add a little note in there, like I've seen it, I've got videos. If this is one that kind of, um, gets your attention with all the info that's in here, then as an update, like I can provide more info at this point. I
Yeah,
didn't.
I love it. I think it's really clear, Jenny. Like just that little snapshot, and it's just so easy to read through. And if they want to go into all, ask you about the single family homes. If somebody knows nothing about Springfield, and obviously everybody has different margins and that sort of thing. But what's an example of like pricing, right? Like of a single family home. Like what would an ideal kind of deal look like that they may be able to actually get in our market? Like price of the home, like general rents, right? Like if you were kind of like right there in the median, like
Um,
paint a picture of like
sure.
what that
So
could look like.
let me think of how I want to word this.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm just because it's like every property is a little bit different.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
so let me pull up, since I've got these ones here, let me look at ones that I've actually sent out. This one's
Yeah,
a
like what
4-2.
can you get? Like what can you get for your money here? I think
Sure.
is what I was
I would
meaning
say
to
like
say.
if we're looking at 1% deals, because I try to start there when I'm analyzing them. I know that everyone's got different margins, and a lot of people now are looking higher than 1%, especially with interest rates what they are. But I try to start there as a starting point, because when we see price drops, or because new investors just getting into it who just want to get started and are willing to stick with 1% to kind of get things rolling, it's something like, if I had to break it down, it would be like a 2-1 in the areas of Springfield that I would personally invest, because I use that as a metric as well, just because I know a
Yep.
lot of people want, like, they want me to comment on it in ways that I can't from like a fair housing standpoint, but
Yep.
I can
Yep.
say that there are areas that I personally wouldn't invest because I
Yeah, they
own.
want to know. They want to know.
Yeah, and since I own properties here, that's just being honest. Like, there are
Mhm,
places that I
mhm.
personally am not interested in, and I'm happy to share that. So in the places that I'm interested in, a 2-1 typically rents anywhere between like $700 and $900, sometimes a little bit higher. But so then your 1% mark is 70 to 90,000. A 3-1 goes into like $1,000 to $1,200. So that's kind of your 1% mark as well. A 3-1.5 jumps you up to like $1,200, $1,300. A 4-1 is in the same kind of spot as a 3-1, where it's like low 1,000s, but a 4-1.5 or higher, then is where we get to like the $1,500 mark on rent.
Mhm.
And if you have a duplex with any of those numbers, they generally stay the same. So like a duplex with a 2-1 on each side is probably going to pull in 1,800 a month gross.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so then you're looking at
Yeah.
180 for your purchase price in order to be at 1%. And those are deals I see all the time. Like, most of the ones I've done this year with investors have been right in that 1% range that way. Like, I sold a duplex for 180 that I think each side is rented for 950. I purchased a duplex this year for 150 that each side is rented for 950. I had a client purchase in the last year at like 87.5, a single family home that he's got rented for 11.25. So, and
Ooh.
these were all on market deals. And it wasn't, I think some of them were more competitive than others as far as going into multiple offers, but some of them it was just a matter of speed and getting an offer in
Mhm.
quickly, so that it was
Mhm.
kind of something where you didn't have to compete with anybody. But it's because of how much I've been looking at it that I'm able to kind of like spout out those numbers. I don't have it like saved as a list or anything, but that's where typically I can pull something up on, realtor.com or on the MLS and see if I'm opening this listing, it's a 4-2. So automatically I know I'm at least 1,500. And the thing that stands out about this house in particular is it's in like one of the heavily desired school districts in the area.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
typically that shoots the rent even higher than just
Yeah.
the bed and bath count. So that was one where like immediately I was able to look at it and be like 4-2, 190, that's interesting. Where's it at? And then once I'm able to see where it's at, I'm able to be like, that's a 1% deal, or at
Yeah,
least.
and there's a lot of demands. Like there's a lot of demand. You mentioned the school districts in the neighborhood that I'm in, there's a lot of demand, right? Like typically the rentals in my neighborhood don't even hit market, right? It's who you know. Do you have a property that you can rent out because it goes so fast?
Mhm. You're
Oh,
kind
sorry
of
guys. I
skipping
think
out,
my
Jess.
internet went in and out. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
A little bit
sorry,
of it.
sorry, sorry.
A little bit
Did
of
you
it.
hear me
You're
say
okay.
there was demand? Okay. Okay. So in my neighborhood in particular, rentals don't even generally make the market, like the open market. Like people, it's who you it's word of mouth. Like do you know something that's coming up? So there's a lot of demand is what I'm saying. And so Jenny, um shoot, I think I froze again.
No, you're okay right now.
Okay. So there's demand. Like when these come on the market, your investors are buying. If that is if the numbers are right, it's like let's go. They put in an offer, done deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, things
I
aren't sitting.
I mean, for the most part, like some of them, it depends on if they're like immediately ready right this second. Some of them they've got like I put a note in here that these are not in an area that I would typically look at, but because the numbers are good and because I'm pulling comps from that area, it might be worth a glance. So then I had investors that usually take my word for it. Like this is not an area I personally would invest tomorrow, but the numbers are there, so they wanted to see it, that kind of thing. Like it's not always immediate because these ones, or at least this one, I think like had a lot of opportunity. And I talked about it with multiple investors this past week, just as an example. But because of the area, sometimes it's different. And so I would say, I'm trying to think, there was one that I just sent out. This one. I sold this duplex because I sent this out. Like I had I had multiple investors that were interested in
Mhm.
it because they saw it on this newsletter. And then I ended up, having to write offers on it to get it sold. So in that case, it was like
Okay, so
competitive, but it was like it came on the market like an hour before I sent out this newsletter. So it was like that
oh
day we were
wow.
scheduling to see it. We were starting to get offers in. Like it was a very quick because it was a very good deal.
So you have to be on the pulse of the market. You're on the pulse of the market.
Mhm.
Question then, when you send something out like this and they're like, "Ooh, that looks like a good opportunity." If I'm an out of state investor, what's your process then for that? How do you get me more data? Do you preview it for me? What do most of your investors do?
Yeah, so I send them the same info. They're able to access the numbers themselves. They're able to read about my opinion on it, and then I would typically just schedule to go see it. I prefer to do videos
Mhm,
as opposed
mhm.
to doing a live walkthrough, just so that in case there's anything that they have questions about or they want to go back and review, they can. But obviously it's important to get, permission from
Yeah,
the tenants to do that if I'm doing so. But that way I can kind of like narrate as I walk through, take my time going through. We don't miss anything because we could always go back and look. Like I had someone ask about an electrical panel in a video I did recently, and I didn't even remember looking at it. And so I had to like go back through the videos and figure out, did I see it? And I did, thank goodness. And so I prefer to take videos, send that to them. Then we could do like a deeper dive of the numbers if they want to. Like the rentometer report on this, I might pull up and like look at these specific comps and compare them and show them like, this is what I'm using, not just this report that's showing me the average, but also like, here's a duplex that's in the same neighborhood that's rented for this much. That's a great comp. Like, I don't see any reason why you would have an issue with this. We talk
mhm.
through if it needs any kind of updating, any kind of repairs. And then I typically leave it to them as far as trying to figure out their numbers because everyone is different. Like some people are totally good with a 1% deal. So in this case, if it was 900 to 1,000, I always tend to stay on the conservative side. So I would say run your numbers at 900 per side. And
Right,
so if we're looking at 180 as a 1% deal, what's your max offer? Like, and
right.
if we're looking at, the kitchens were a little dated in this duplex, but the roof was new, the electrical was new, the plumbing was new. It was like a 1950s brick ranch duplex on a slab. Like we're looking at almost no maintenance for the foreseeable future. Just some updating. And so if we're looking at it from that perspective on the numbers, like how important is it to you to update? Do you think, or do we think in talking through it that adding those kitchen updates is going to do anything for the rent that you're able to pull in? In this case, probably not. Like we're probably a little bit maxed out for the area. And I don't know that updating the kitchen is going to matter that much as far as even if you're pulling in an extra $200 a month, how long is it going to take you to pay off $10,000 in renovations? Like it's
Sure.
probably not worth it. But like how important is it to you to have an investment that you aren't really going to have to think about those capex expenditures like anytime soon? And so that's where like, I give them that info and then I say, tell me what you want to do. Like, I don't want to be like making offers for people if they're like, what do you think of this number, et cetera, et cetera. I might be able to be like, I think that's too high. I think you could go a little bit higher if it works for your numbers, like in
Mhm.
order to stay competitive. But I try not to tell anybody like you should offer X amount, like because their
Yeah,
numbers are going to be different than my numbers and their max is going to be different than my max.
yeah, totally. And so all the investors on the call, I mean, the note there is like you got to learn the math. Like don't rely solely on your agent partner or on somebody else telling you what they think. Like, you're going to have, no, like my partner Rob always says, know your money math, know your money math. And that goes for your business as well as it goes for your investments. Like, you've got to decide ultimately. A great investor focused agent can guide you, but you have to ultimately be the one that decides, and you have to know your numbers. Okay, so we're almost to the end. I definitely want to leave a couple minutes for people to ask questions. But I guess the last piece is, Jenny. So let's say out of state investor, local investors are obviously going to tour it themselves, but you do the video. They're like, cool, let's go. What about getting it? Getting a tenant in there? Like, what's your process for that? How do you help out of state investors? Do you, and I think this is what you do, you just refer out maybe a property manager to do
Yeah.
that? Like, what does that look like, so we can close the loop on the find, buy, and get it rented up?
Sure. So they have to think about whether they want to try and self-manage or whether they want a property manager, because out of state, I would probably always recommend a property manager, but some people are willing to try it themselves. Like, they're
They
willing to
do.
coordinate, handymen when there's issues, and they're willing to field the phone calls, things like that. But we typically look on whether or not it's currently got tenants, and that goes into the offer as well. So this one, at the time that we were writing offers, it had tenants on both sides, but they were month to month. And so in this case, they were paying under market rent. It was something where my clients had to kind of figure out, like, what would be the game plan as far as, do we want to request that it's vacant at closing? Because they can do that. Or do
Right.
we want to try and work with the current tenants and, like, over time bring the rents up? Do we want to bring the rents up immediately and risk alienating the tenants? Like, there are multiple ways to approach it if it's already occupied. And they kind of have to make that decision for themselves, and then we build it into the offer.
What they do on this one?
Um, well, it's still under contract.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Top
Um,
secret.
no, it's not even, I mean, I think it's fine. They decided to leave everything alone for now. We can't really negotiate the terms of their leases while we're under contract. Like, that's
Right.
something that they have to do after we close anyway. So I more want it to be, like, in their mind for their planning. Like, what are you going to do? The only thing that they can really do is, if it is month to month tenants where it's not a longer term lease, they can request that it's vacant at closing, because then it's up to the seller to terminate that month to month lease with their tenants.
And some investors do that, right? Like, I hear, like, in our network, some say, no, I don't want any tenants in there, no
Yeah,
matter what, for any of my properties. But in
yeah.
this case, your investors were comfortable with leaving them in there and then
Yeah,
deciding
just because
afterwards.
if you already have an established tenant, it might be easier to try and work your way up to market rent if it's not performing at market rent, or if you have an established tenant and they are paying market rent, it might be worth it to keep them since they're already there. Like, you don't have to turn it, you don't have to change anything. I have some investors that only really want to look at occupied properties because they think the leasing part is stressful, and then I have some that prefer them
Oh,
because they don't want to deal with pre-established tenants and
they
potentially
want,
having.
so they want to inherit properties with tenants.
If
Mm.
they're paying market rent. That's
Right,
where it gets
right,
kind
right.
of
If they're
tricky.
paying market
Because
rent.
otherwise then they have to figure out how they're gonna go about it. Like, are they just gonna, like, increase it as soon as they get in there and then potentially have tenants that can't pay it? Or
Yeah.
are they gonna try and bring it up over time? Like, it depends. It's situation to situation. But that's if it's occupied. If it's vacant, then yeah, getting them set up with a property manager. I have kind of a short list. I feel like anybody that's ever invested in real estate knows it's really hard to find, like, high quality property managers. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
working on continuing to build my list. We use one that's been great for us, but I've recommended it to tenants where it hasn't gone as well. And then
Mm-hmm.
or tenants, I'm sorry, investors. And that could be partially because they're not local and we are. I have some that are just breaking into Springfield for my investors to try and figure out, like, if it's a market that they want to be doing property management work in, and just like, every deal trying to build that list for them. Um,
Yeah.
and they typically ask about, like, what's the leasing fee from the PM and what's their monthly fee. And so at this point, I can give them a breakdown of what all of those individuals offer so that they're able to go and, like, make contact with whichever one they want.
Yeah, and I think that that's going to be, a theme for smaller towns, right? You're not going to have the bigger property management companies like a Cincinnati or Cleveland might have. And so you really got to find the right vendor to build a
Mhm.
relationship to manage the property. So we will keep you posted, okay, guys, because that is what we do. me, Jenny, Sarah, we are actively building our network and our Rolodex here in Springfield, Ohio to bring you the best. We want A players only. A players only. Like that's where I'm at in my career, right? And so that goes with immediate team members and it also goes with vendors. Okay, I want to open it up, everybody. I want to open it up. I know I got a couple minutes left. But this is so helpful, Jenny. Like I know you and I know our market, and this is helpful even for me. So what questions do you guys have about Springfield in general? And or for Jenny about the inventory here? Let us know. This is the time. And let me roll through a couple of things that I think I missed. Naomi asks, what are your suggestions? And I think she may be an agent. What's your suggestions as far as KPI, the KPI process goes to get 2 to 5 closings a month with your investor pool? Yeah, that's an agent investor model question. Like how many people do you have to be working with to be able to close those two to 5 deals a month?
That is a great question that I don't know if I can answer yet because I'm not currently doing 2 to 5 a month. I consider myself like, and I don't know if I should be putting this label on it, but I generally consider myself more part-time than the typical agent. And so like in part because I am home with my kiddo a lot of the time.
Sure.
And so I don't know
So
if I have
double it. So think about it from a scalability standpoint, like based on what you know about how many investors you're able to serve with the inventory that you find. If you were able to double that or triple that, like let's say Cam's back in school, you're full time, like what could that look like, do you think, based on what you know now?
So my email list probably has about 30 people on it right now. And most of those like contacts I've gathered this year, they're people who specifically asked to be on it.
Yeah.
As far as the investors that I have closed with in like this 2024, I think I'm at like 4 or 5. Like I said, I'm very part-time in my business, and that works for me. But those
Yeah.
are like the active investors that like the first like 4 or 5 that reach out to me every time I send out the newsletter. And so like at that point, I have, sorry, thinking through.
No, go ahead.
This duplex it's new investors that I just picked up, but I know that they're aiming to do at least 1 or 2 a year in Springfield.
Yeah, I mean they're multi-transactional clients,
Yeah.
right? For many agents who are on here, these are multi-transactional clients. So not all of them. Some people like are just looking for the first deal, or they're only able to buy one every every couple years, and that's totally fine. But
Yeah.
you will have, working that model, people who are buying all the time, and so it's not necessarily about quantity, right? It's about the quality of the people on your list and really understanding like what they're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So Jenny's like developing relationships with people and getting to know their buy box. That's why it's so important to understand your buy box. What I might be comfortable buying, Sarah might not, or what Jenny buys, I might not, or whatever. Like it all comes down to a comfortability level. Oh, that's a great question. Okay. What do you do when more than one of your investors want the same property?
So, yeah.
What do you
I ran
do?
into this multiple times last week. It was a very busy week.
Oh,
Yeah. So like I said, I generally try to not share opinions as much as like the facts of the deal as much as humanly possible, because it's not, first of all, it's not really my job to give them opinions on like what they should be offering. Like they need to figure out what works with the numbers that they yes, it is a good problem to have.
yeah.
They need to figure out what works with the numbers that like what their goals are for each individual property. And so like I generally compile all of that info the best that I can. I still like weekly get an investor that's like, what would you offer on this house? And I have to be like, I really can't answer that question. Like, not just if I have to write for multiple investors, but like specifically because your numbers are going to look different than my numbers. Your goals are going to look different than my goals. And so I have to advise them if I have multiple investors that want to write on the same property. I have to disclose that as an agent.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
they have to sign a form that says that they know I'm writing multiple offers, the contemporaneous offer form. And
Oh yeah.
it's
Okay.
I have had investors that are like totally fine with that. And I have had investors that like get a little bit salty about it. And I get it because it's frustrating. But from my perspective as an agent, I try to tell them, like, if you want to use me and you want my input, it's not fair for me to be like on a first come, first serve basis. The best way that I can think to handle it is I've got team members. I believe in them. I know that they can all accomplish all the same things and I trust them with my life. Like I know that they would guide
Yeah.
you. So if you want like an individual agent that's only writing for you on this particular property where I happen to have two other investors that want to write on it, in that case, I would defer to a team member and I'm happy to set that introduction up. And it's not even like a referral, like I just want my clients to be taken care of. And that's only if they're uncomfortable with it. Otherwise, like so far, everybody's been like, I don't love that this is happening, but I trust you. Like, you're giving me the info. Here's my best offer. And that's what I tell them. Just put your best foot forward because you know you're in multiples. And it's probably not just us. Like, it's not just
Yep.
me writing the multiples. Like, if I have multiple people writing on it, it's already
Right.
got multiple offers. Like, it's not just like my client base doing this. So
Right.
I try to tell them at that point, just put your best foot forward. Like, here's all the facts I can give
Yep.
you. You can ask me any question. If I can't answer it because it interferes with a different offer, I'll tell you.
Yep.
But otherwise, just do your absolute best. Like what works.
Yeah. I mean, that's your motto. Unless you buy in like 20 houses a month, client, and then we'll put you maybe a priority status. But until then, you really have to play fair and say, look, like I'm trying to matchmake here. I'm trying to help. You're trying to help everybody win, but you're not prioritizing necessarily one person over the other. You're trying to guide as best as possible and then let the market dictate who kind of wins in that scenario. But I also like what you said. You offer up that fiduciary opportunity with another team member should they want that and feel more comfortable with that. Okay, Jenny, Michael says, do you look at what just came in on the market daily, typically through realtor.com or the MLS or RPR? What's your best suggestions to learning a new market?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. So again, because I just really like realtor.com, I feel like this is such a like a personal preference thing, but I just find it so much easier to use than like even Zillow.
Or the MLS?
Or the MLS, yeah.
Oh my God, I love this. I love this tip. I love this tip so much because like my main gig, guys, is like brand marketing, user design. Like I'm very sensitive to like how like, like where the button is on the page and how big it is and everything. And so to Jenny's point, like, yeah, like why wouldn't you use the most user-friendly tool out there? And a lot of agents, like you think, well, you would go to the MLS, but you're saying like, no, like I love the user friendliness of realtor.com.
I like it way more than my IDX website. I like it way more than the MLS. Like
Oh,
it's
that's
just,
interesting.
and
Yeah.
if I need more info, if I need disclosures, if I need, agent contact info, if I want to double check agent notes, then I'll go on the MLS. But for the most part, my notifications are set up to my phone on realtor.com. I get notified of like every single thing that comes on the market in Springfield. So my phone has like hundreds.
Look, that is a huge, guys, that is a huge value nugget. That's a huge value nugget. She's looking at inventory all the time from an investor perspective, and her go-to way of looking at the data is on realtor.com.
Yeah.
So
It
there
just,
you
I
go.
have a
That's
general search set up for any property type, any price range, Springfield, Ohio, like just that area, and I get a push notification every time there's a new listing. So in being a smaller market, that might be a little more doable than in some of the bigger markets that are on here, just because like it's not a major city. So I'm not gonna see like hundreds and hundreds a day, but I am gonna see probably like 100 a week. And so I get those notifications, and the best way to learn it is just, I feel like, to look at them. Like that's all I can think, especially from an investor perspective, like
yeah.
going through it. Like I said, it took me a while to get the hang of like if I run all these different 3-1 properties through Rentometer and I look at what's up for rent on Zillow as a 3-1 in any area of town, like what are they typically renting for? And then once I know that, I can narrow in a little bit more on the specific areas. Like a lot of that was talking to other agents. A lot of that was talking to like friends I have that live in the area because I didn't grow up here, but my husband did. And we've got friends here now that can speak to
Yeah.
like if I have an investor working in this area, what are some things I need to know versus like again, the things that I can't really necessarily like recommend or not recommend based on fair housing things. Like I try to stay like more objective about an area, like by looking at the stats with like crime rates, things like that. And like, is it an area I would personally go? I'm in like every local Facebook group I can think of just to know what's going on in town. Um, like I'm in, you know, like any of the news groups in town. I'm in any of like the crime pages in town. Like sometimes that feeds into like what I can share about an area. Like, and I think it's just like looking at everything that you can. In the past, I have been
Absorbing
on
yourself
teams.
in the market.
Yeah, like as many notifications as you can stand to turn on and like really get a chance to look at. Like I've got my phone all day long. So even when I'm like home with my kid and I'm not like actively working that day or whatever, like I still am getting notified about what's happening. And it's just a quick glance. It doesn't have to be like taking notes and like writing everything down. It's just kind of staying on top of what's going on.
Yeah, you're just absorbing the information. And I love that note, Jenny. If you were looking for a particular market, get in those city Facebook groups, right? Like you're going to see a little bit of everything in those things, but it will give you a sense of the market. And Michael, what I like to do, because I've lived in multiple markets, and I've had to do this because I had my license in Florida and I had my license in Virginia, and I didn't know those markets at all. Was I really start with the map, like how, I guess full circle moment where we started with the beginning of this call was I like maps. Like get out the map and see where the main thoroughfares are, right? Like literally print it off. I would go to you can get, those like fold up maps. Like you can get them for free at some of the government offices in town. I've done that every single time. I lay out the map, I put it on the wall, and I, get a highlighter. And in Springfield, by the way, Springfield, what I like about Springfield is it's almost like a true cross, like
It
with our
really is.
thoroughfares, right? It's almost like north, south, east, west. So our market is even easier, I think, to learn than something like Northern Virginia, which is like, well, oh my God, like this touches the, everything kind of it's just much bigger and much more nuanced and much more complex. So, but yeah, that's what I start. Look at the thoroughfares, highlight them, print them, and every time you look at a property, like put a pin on it, right? Like every time you drive around, I mean, well, you can't drive around if you're out of state, but I mean, Google Maps, man, like get on Google Maps, get on Google Earth, like really look at as much as you can. And it can be overwhelming. I mean, when you learn a new market, it can be overwhelming, but it will come to be that if you keep, like Jenny said, keep looking at inventory, keep just absorbing yourself in the city and the county and the listings, you will learn it. Like you will learn it. And reaching out to an agent, right? A fiduciary in that market, like that's why that is so important. Okay. Sandra said, I'm in Northern Virginia, DMV area, and I agree with you, Jess. Yeah, girl. It's like, woo. I mean, those are just tough markets to learn. They for so many reasons. But there's not like, and I think that's why I like Springfield. It's like, it's like Springfield, what surrounds us, Jenny? Cornfields,
Oh yeah.
right? Like,
A lot of
okay,
corn. A
rural
lot of
area.
corn.
So when you're out of the city and when you're in the city, like, it's not like other cities where each of the cities kind of butt up against each other and you kind of don't know where you are ever. Like Northern Virginia is like that. You know where you're at. You're either in Springfield or you in the cornfield. And
What's so funny about that, Jess, is I grew up in Cleveland and I like the stat is something like 90% of Ohio is cornfields. I had no idea. Like I grew
oh
up like 20 minutes from downtown Cleveland And
Oh, I didn't
you
know
could go
that.
out an hour and it was still suburban. Like
Oh
it
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like that specific area of the state is very much not cornfields, but I feel like everywhere else, exactly like you said, you know when you're out of it because you're
You
in
know when you're
cornfields.
out of it, and you know what quadrant you're in. So
Yep.
like, you know what I mean? So anyway, yeah, my God bless you, everyone in other markets. Miami was another one. I was in Miami. Again, I had to learn it. I had to get out the stupid map, and I just had to look at the map and study it. Like there was no other way. What is the difference between Kendall and South Beach? And I but I learned it. But I learned it, right? Because I was intentional about learning it. Okay, guys, listen, we're a couple minutes over. Jenny, I really appreciate your time. If you found this helpful, let us know. Please reach out to Jenny. If you have additional questions about Ohio, she is your lighthouse here. But you know, both of us can certainly answer any questions about our region. We are also developing partnerships and relationships with people in Dayton, people in Columbus, right? Like I want to know who all my A players are in the Ohio market. So that's an ongoing thing that we continue to do. But yeah, if you got, and if you're watching this afterwards, we still see all the notifications. So if you're on Facebook and you're watching the live stream, then just pop a question below, tag Jenny, and we will take care of it. Anything else I forgot, Jenny?
No, I don't think so. Thank you so much for having me. I hope it was helpful.
Yes. Oh my gosh. And what would be a parting one piece of advice that you would give an out of state investor about Springfield or just in general as a parting gift?
Ooh, that's such an interesting
I
question.
know. I didn't prep her for this. Sorry.
No, not at
I
all.
should have. Okay.
Um, I think it would just be like the typical advice to like know what's in your buy box. Like know
Yeah.
what to keep
Yeah.
it. Don't be open to every single thing because there is every single thing and it can get overwhelming. Like you need to know your limits of what you're comfortable with in a property and stick to that.
Yeah. I think that's really
And
smart.
then we'll find it.
I love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Jenny.
Thank
All right,
you.
everybody. Listen, we are doing these Grid TV free trainings weekly on Wednesday. We've got some amazing people lined up for the future. So check out Rhea, will you pop that calendar link down there so they can see all the trainings? And that's my job at Grid HQ is to continue to bring you guys content and community and just opportunities to learn and network with people. Yep, it's Grid Investor /calendar. And this one will also be on YouTube. So it'll just be up there forever.
That's intimidating.
Thank you, everybody. Have an amazing week, and we will see you soon. Okay.